Ella Pamfilova is one of the highest-profile figures in the Russian political landscape. She was Minister for Social Affairs under Boris Yeltsin. Vladimir Putin appointed her presidential advisor on human rights, and his successor, Dmitry Medvedev, made her head of an advisory council for civil rights. She's now turned her back on the government.
Over and over you hear the right words, liberalization and freedom. Over and over they say we have to take action against criminals. We need independent courts. But nothing changes. They're just empty words, no deeds.
Ella Pamfilova is a familiar face at discussions about press freedom in Russia. She doesn't play the opposition part, denouncing the Kremlin. She's a Democrat through and through, respected by opponents of the regime.
I've been arrested and put behind bars, and I was only released because respected activists stood up for me. Mrs. Pamfilova helped a lot. At the time, she was still head of the Advisory Council for Civil Rights.
Pamfilova headed the Kremlin's Advisory Council for 8 years, in the end serving under the current president, Dmitry Medvedev. She had placed her last hopes in him, only to be bitterly disappointed. She felt the only option left open to her was to step down, which she did.
Whenever Putin didn't agree with something, he'd say no. But when he supported an initiative, you could depend on it going through. Medvedev does nothing but talk.
Medvedev talks about freedom even as critics and opposition demonstrators are arrested on the streets of Moscow. Medvedev promises independent courts, even as highly controversial trials, like the one of former oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky, continued. And Medvedev demands greater freedom of the press, even as critical Russian journalists continue to fear for their lives. Pamfilova has expressly pointed these abuses out to the president and reaps criticism, scorn, and even threats from many figures in the power elite.
She realized there wasn't much more she could achieve. The people with the influence and power she depended on to get anywhere had all turned against her.
This is Pamfilova's old office, now occupied by her successor. While she claimed the administration wielded too much control over society, Mikhail Fedotov sees himself on equal terms with the Kremlin.
Ella Pamfilova was outside the state power structure and not integrated into the president's administration. That has now changed. I am the official presidential advisor.
A reception at the French embassy, also in honor of a Russian human rights activist. Pamfilova doesn't attend as many of these events as she used to. Friends and fellow activists don't understand, but it's simply a question of taking time out.
A lot of people in Russia now wonder how their lives are to continue. Me too. I still have a lot of power and energy and experience. I don't want to just watch. I want to change the country for my children and grandchildren. But what can I do?
Pamfilova leaves the embassy reception early. She's disillusioned and at a loss for ideas. One day she will return to carry on the fight for human rights in Russia. In future, however, that activity will be outside the Kremlin walls.